All right, we're going to get started. Thought I was waiting for a few more, but I just got told they weren't coming. So it's been a while since we've done this. I don't remember the last date, last year. I do have to confess, I know as a public speaker you're not supposed to say this, but I did not really prepare tonight. Just had a hard time sitting down and getting my thoughts together. So I'm going to kind of wing it. But first I'm going to do like a quick recap of just what we've done so far. So for those that are new or haven't listened, this is call this class like the Attributes of God class. And what we do is I go through some of God's attributes. So the first one we did was called God's aseity, but don't really remember it that way. Just call it God's self-existence. God's self-existence. And this basically means that God does not have a cause. God wasn't caused by something. He didn't have a beginning. He is self-caused. Like he is the reason for his existence. That was the first attribute we did. The next one we did, let's see if I can remember these because my brain isn't working. We did also God's immutability, which is also just that God is unchanging. And again, like during this class, I went through 6 different ways that God was unchanging, mostly in his divine nature. It's not that God is completely unchanging. He's not like a rock that is just frozen. He can change in relationship with people. What's up, Garrett?
Matching shirts.
I like your jacket. We also did, I feel like I'm missing the second one. Someone want to remind me? We did God's omnipresence. Actually, no, we did eternity. God's eternity. That was the one. Again, this was a fun one where we talked about time and trying to explain time, and that was. But then this is just that God is eternal. He has always existed and will always continue to exist. And then the last one we did was God's omnipotence. No, not omnipotence. Sorry. Omnipresence. And this is just, God is everywhere. God is all around us. He is everywhere you are. He is everywhere that everything is. God is everywhere. Now, I want to sort of revisit omnipresence a little bit because in our discussions we were sort of talking about, and I sort of brought up the point that by God being omnipresent, he doesn't actually have like a physical body. God doesn't have a body. God is spirit. God is incorporeal. Now, this brought up a lot of questions. Incorporeal. That he is without form. That this God is without form. That he is not physically everywhere. So it's not like we are in a part of God by being in this room. That this brought up some questions, some things that maybe like the Bible said where like it describes God as like being in heaven, sitting on his throne, or that God sees with his eyes, or like becoming face to face with God. And I sort of spoke about how like a lot of this is allegory. Like the Bible speaks in ways that we can understand. Now, I sort of said that, like, it's when you read the Bible, don't always take it so literally, but I think I may have come across as sort of dismissing the Bible in a certain way, and I didn't want to do that. The point is to find what is the message that the Scripture is trying to convey. Was brought up about when Moses went up with the 10 Commandments that he asked to see God, and God like basically was like, you can't really look on me, but I'll let you see my back as I'm walking through. And sort of when we read that, it's not, the message to get is that like, oh, God walked by Moses and Moses looked at his back. I think the message that scripture is trying to understand is that God is beyond our understanding. I think that is the message that scripture is trying to teach us. And so when you read the Bible, you sort of have to look for what is the message that is trying to be said. And also understand that much of the Bible was written at a certain time for a certain people, but it doesn't mean that there isn't then a message that we can draw from it. If you remember, like a long, long time ago, back at the beginning of this class, I sort of talked about the ways in which we learn about God. And last year's class had to do with what is called general revelation. And this is like God in nature, like God in, I used arguments to illustrate God. It was like non-biblical. It wasn't using any type of religion. It was just, we use like the moral argument, the arguments from science and from nature. And it's just that God is revealed sort of in creation, that, we can see his presence in the way he's created the world. It even says that in the Bible. Like Paul talks about that a lot. But in this class I had, like, what are some other ways we can learn about God? And we came up, people said a bunch of different things, but this is called special revelation. And as Christians, the two types of special revelation we deal in are both the Bible, the Word of God, and then Jesus Christ. Those are the two Christian special revelations of how we learn about the truths of God. Now, privately, I got some questions like, someone might have a dream, or someone might speak something to somebody, or someone might have like a vision. You hear about that and you're like, is this special revelation from God? And in this context, no, it's not. And what I mean by that is that in Christian doctrine, what we mean by special revelation is that God's already revealed his truths, like in Christ and in the Bible. So when God gives you a vision, he might be speaking something specifically to your life that might be true about his life, but he's not giving new revelatory truths about Christianity. And that's why they say, like, always check with the Bible. You should go speak to Dave, your pastor, about dreams you had. And so a good sign to sort of see someone who might be like a charlatan or might not be so like following God's word is when someone, I have this new truth about God. God has given me this truth. And they start to say something, and then you check the scripture and you check Christ, and it's like, actually, this doesn't match up. So again, like God isn't going to be revealing like new doctrines. So that's what I mean by special revelation. And that's so, like I said, some people were confused or like, God's revealed something to me. Like, no, he has like a specific message for you. Yes.
Like when people do get special revelations, are they just deceived, or like what do you?
No. Like what I mean is like God might reveal something to you, and it might be. I'm not saying it's a deception, but you have to then check it with the Bible. Like it needs to line up with God's word. Okay. I mean, I think that you agree with that.
I do. Yeah.
And you might learn something specific about your life. Like you might get a prophecy about something that's to come. But again, that's not going to be something that's like changes the Bible, like changes the word of God, Right. So that's what I mean by special revelation. Like you're not going to get a word that then all of a sudden changes something about like the scripture or about Jesus. You're not going to get like a new, I got this vision and you know what? I found out that Jesus was actually married for 2 years.
Okay.
And you're like, no, God showed me. He gave me a special. That's what I mean by special revelation. Okay, so any other questions about those original 4 things? Pass the microphone before we jump into the new one.
So I don't think I understand omnipresent very well.
Okay.
Maybe it's just because it's always said kind of in an analogy way, but it's like Psalm 100 says, come into his courts with thanksgiving, into his gates with praise. And so it seems to indicate that sometimes we're closer to God than other times. Is that just all analogous because we can't really understand it?
I mean, I think in the class too, I said that it doesn't say that God is everywhere equally. That God might be more present in certain places. Like God isn't as equally in Jupiter, like as he is here. And when I said, you think of it physically, when I say God is here more so than he is in Jupiter, I mean causally. Like God is more causally here, not more physically here. Like he is more involved in Earth, like what we're doing here, than what's going on in
I like
the
that.
outer reaches of space. So it's not an equal presence. Okay, last chance. Any more questions about those first four? I know there's some new people, but you can ask me whatever you want. I might say I don't know. All right, so tonight we're going to start a new one. And the new attribute of God we're going to talk about is probably the most talked about one, and it is God's omniscience. So I'm going to hand out some worksheets. There's pens somewhere. Again, these worksheets are just for you. You don't have to take one. You don't have to take notes. There's not going to be a test unless Dave decides to write one up. But I'm not going to give you a test. This is just for your own. Well, actually, can I get one of those? This is just for your own to help you if you're interested to keep track. And the way this works is I go through first the biblical, what the Bible says about God's omniscience before we sort of dive into like the philosophy and the objections to it. But first, let me sort of just define omniscience. Comes from the Latin word omni, which means all, and the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge. We also get our word science from that Latin word scientia, but the word actually means knowledge. It doesn't mean science. So basically what this means is God has all knowledge. So I'm going to dive into some Bible verses. There's actually a lot this week compared to some other weeks, and I actually omitted a bunch because the Bible talks about this a lot. So let's start with Psalm 139. Verses 1 through 6. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down. You are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You have enclosed me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain it. And this gives sort of a broad, very, very beautiful, poetic sort of explanation of God's omniscience. I'm going to go into 4 ways in which the Bible talks about God being omniscient because he has many types of knowledge. So we're going to start there. First of all, like God knows basically everything that's happening in the universe. In the earth, in the world, like he just knows everything that's going on. And we'll start in Job chapter 28, verses 24. It says, "For he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens." So in Job, it says that God is aware of everything in the earth and in the heavens. And then again on Job chapter 31, verse 4, again, this is asking a rhetorical question, but does he not see my ways and number all my steps? I mean, the answer is obviously yes. That's the point of the question. That God knows all of Job's ways, like that's what he's talking to Job, and knows everything that Job is doing, knows everywhere Job is going. And then in similar fashion, if you go to Job 34, verses 21 and 22, it sort of takes that concept and applies it to all man. For his eyes are upon the ways of a man, and he sees all his steps. There is no darkness or deep shadow where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. And God knows everything that man is doing. If we go to Proverbs chapter 15, verse 3, this sort of reiterates this. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, watching the evil and the good. Again, this is also references God's omnipresence. So his omniscience and his omnipresence. So he is both everywhere and knows everything that is happening everywhere. And then if we go to the New Testament, Christ himself reiterates this. Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 through 31. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent? and yet not one of them will fall. Will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But the very hairs on your head are numbered. So do not fear, for you are more valuable than many sparrows. So again, even Christ affirms that God knows. God knows everything about you. So then another way in which God knows, God's omniscience applies, he also knows the thoughts of people. In 1 Chronicles 28, verse 9, David's talking to Solomon, who's his son. And he says, "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will let you find him, but if you forsake him, he will reject you." So here David is telling Solomon that God knows both his heart and his intentions. And then in Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 9 and 10, "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" The question. "I, the Lord, I search the heart, I test the mind, even to give each man according to his ways, according to the results of his deeds." So God knows everything about you. He knows your thoughts, he knows your heart, he knows your intentions, even when you might not know. You might lie to yourself, but God knows. In many ways, God knows you better than yourself. I also want to just go to the New Testament to affirm this. In Hebrews 4, chapter 13, "There is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are open and laid bare to the eyes of him whom we have to do." I mean, this is a little more poetic way it describes it, but it's almost as though we are completely naked before God. Like he sees everything. We can't hide ourselves in the same way that Adam and Eve tried to hide themselves. And that's just everything that's going on inside of our hearts and our minds. God knows it all. Another way in which God's knowledge applies is that God knows the future. Again, that first group of verses I read from Psalm, in the fourth verse, Psalm 139, verse 4, it says that even before there was a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. So he knows what we're going to say even before we say it. And I think this translates into he knows what we're going to do before we do it. And then in the same chapter, 139, if you go to verses 14 through 16, "I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well." And this is where it starts in 15. "My frame was not hidden from you. When I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth, your eyes had seen my unformed substance. And in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, and as yet there was not one of them." Again, this is describing that even before we're born, even as we're just in the womb, God knows us. Like he knows what our life is going to be. And then I'll go to Isaiah, but before I read it, in Isaiah is talking about that Isaiah was very outspoken against the pagan gods of the time, and he compared them to God of Israel. And again, he used this as contrast to them. Like the other gods that the other people worship didn't know the future. They couldn't predict the future as God could. And so I'm going to read from Isaiah 41, verses 21 through 24. "Present your case," the Lord says. "Bring forward your strong arguments," the King of Jacob says. "Let them bring forth and declare to us what is going to take place. As for the former events, declare what they were, that we may consider them and know their outcome, or announce to us what is coming. Declare the things that are going to come afterwards, that we may know that you are gods. Indeed, do good or evil, that we may anxiously look about us and fear together. Behold, you are of no account, and your work amounts to nothing. He who chooses you is an abomination." And God is essentially like making his own deity like stand or fall on this way they can predict what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. That God is saying like, you can't do this, but I can. And Isaiah is basically giving testimony to that. And then even, I'm not going to read the verse, but in the New Testament, Jesus himself makes predictions. I mean, he makes many predictions about his second coming, he predicts his own death, which came true. He also predicts Judas' betrayal and even Peter denying him 3 times. And it's very specific, and it happened. And then the fourth way that God is omniscient is that God doesn't learn anything. He doesn't learn any new knowledge. You can't teach him. So again, and this is in Job 21 verse 22. Can anyone teach God knowledge in that he judges those on high? And again, a rhetorical question. The answer is obviously no. No one can teach God. God's knowledge is perfect. Also, like Job in chapter 37, I don't have the verse, but I think he just says God's knowledge is perfect. So again, I just want to say the scripture tells us the 4 ways in which God is omniscient, and that he knows everything that is going on, knows everything that is happening, he knows everything about you. He knows all your thoughts, all your desires, all your intentions. He has a very clear view of your heart. He understands you even better than you understand yourself. He knows the future. He has foreknowledge of events that are to come. And then also he cannot be taught anything. God knows everything. Now, does anybody want to add to sort of that? Sort of biblically, if you have some scriptures you want to add or say anything about it. Again, how this works, if you haven't been to the class, we sort of start with the biblical information before we sort of dive into discussion. Okay, so I'm going to go on to another sort of biblical thing, but it's going to start our discussion off, and because it's kind of controversial, it's weird to say something like that is controversial, but there is a 5th type of knowledge that I think God has, and this is what's called, it's on the form, it's called middle knowledge. I'll write it down. And the reason I say it's sort of controversial is because there are many theologians who don't think God has this knowledge, and there's even some sort of denominations that don't think God has this. Middle knowledge, I'm going to go through a lengthy explanation of it, but it is basically like if-then knowledge. Like, if this, then this. And God knows the truth of that. So, like, God knows what would happen under different circumstances. If different things were to happen, God would know, even though those things haven't happened and will not happen. But God still knows what would happen. So, there's one really good verse that sort of gives evidence to this. It's sort of long, but I'm going to skip over a lot. But it's back in 1 Samuel, and at the time this takes place, David was fleeing Saul. Saul was the king of Israel, but David was supposed to be king. God had said David is to be king, and Saul got very jealous, tried to kill David a number of times. But David was still trying to do things for the Lord. He had a bunch of followers, and at this time, the Lord sort of commanded David to go into Keilah and drive out the Philistines. The Philistines had occupied this place of Keilah, and God was basically like, go to Keilah, drive out the Philistines for me and free these people. David did that, and he was in Keilah, and Saul found out he was in Keilah, and Saul was going to like, I can trap him there, I'm going to go get him and kill him. So this is where it picks up. Now David knew that Saul was plotting evil against him. So he said to Abiathar, the priest, bring the ephod here. Then David said, the ephod, it was sort of just like a holy thing that they would pray to, almost like and sort of the priest would get answers from God. Then David said, O Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard for certain that Saul is seeking to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hand? Will Saul come down just as your servant has heard? O Lord God of Israel, I pray, tell your servant. The Lord said, he will come down. Then David said, will the men of Keilah surrender me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they will surrender you. Then David and his men, about 600, arose, departed from Keilah, and they went wherever they could go. When it was told Saul that David had escaped from Keilah, he gave up the pursuit. So, what God said would happen didn't actually happen because David left. Saul didn't come down to Keilah, and the men of Keilah didn't give David over to Saul because David listened to God and left. So basically what it was is like, if David didn't leave, Saul would have come down. God knew this, and David left. So this is what I mean by middle knowledge. These things never happened, so they're not true, but God knew what would happen. And again, I'm going to do, some of your eyes might glaze over, but we're going to do a little bit of an English class here. Because in English, what this is called is subjective conditional. And these are if-then statements. So the subjective conditional involved here is that if David were to remain in Keilah, then Saul would have come down. So it's the if-then. Now this statement, I might write this out, but maybe not. So I'm going to write it. If David were to remain in Keilah, then Saul would have come down. Now, because God told him what would happen, David left. So this right here is what's called a false antecedent. Like, it's not true. David left. So it's a false antecedent. So what we call these in philosophy is this is a counterfactual statement. Again, you don't have to remember any of these words. There's not going to be a test. But we use these in English a lot. You know, like I could say, if I were David, I would sell my boat. But again, I'm not David, so it's like a false antecedent. It's a counterfactual. Now, a lot of times when people speak in everyday speak, they use this wrong. A lot of times people say, or I would say, if I was David, and that's actually, what that literally means is that at some point in the past, I was David. Like, so it's supposed to be were. Oops. So just remember that it's not was, it's were. When you say was, like you're literally saying that I was David. If I was to some point be David, become David, I would sell his boat. Take that money. So again, just when you think of these, it's that if it were the case that something, then it would be the case that something else. Now, this is what we're talking about in middle knowledge, with God having middle knowledge. Now, it isn't always the case that these have false antecedents. So we can go back to our biblical reference. Think of in John chapter 20, 21, I don't know, the story of when they caught all the fish. So the disciples were fishing and they couldn't catch any fish. And Jesus came down and he said, cast the net on the right side of the boat. And they did it. And the nets were overflowing. So what did Jesus know? Jesus knew this subjective conditional that if they were to cast the net on the right side of the boat, then they would catch a lot of fish. And in this case, the disciples listened to them. So the antecedent was no longer false. But Jesus knew it beforehand. Now, they could have not chosen to listen to them. And in that case, like, it wouldn't have happened. Now, if Jesus were here, would he tell David to sell his boat? Now again, so remember, this one is called a counterfactual when it has a false antecedent. When it has a true antecedent, it's called a deliberative conditional. Again, you don't need to remember those, but if some people wanted a little English lesson, you need the microphone.
No, just a quick question. The example of the true antecedent is what you just said?
Yes. Yes, because they did it.
It came to pass.
Yes. But if they didn't do it, it would have been a false antecedent. Now, think of it, we use these millions of times a day in our own head. Okay, not millions, but we use these all the time in our own head. Like you use these when you're making decisions. Like when I'm sitting at a stop sign and I need to pull out onto 9W. In my head, I'm like, well, if I were to pull out now, then that car that's right there might hit me. So I don't pull out. So would that car have really hit me? I don't know, but this doctrine would say that God would know what actually would happen if I were to pull out at that time, like if the car would have hit me or not. God knows that. And that's what middle knowledge is. You know, like if I was a smoker, I might say, well, if I were to quit smoking, I won't get lung cancer. You know, I might not get lung cancer if I quit or not, but God would know. It's another good. You need the microphone.
No, you need to wait.
No, you can't.
It's so that people can hear when
it's
they
for the
listen
recording.
online.
So if God knows it, and it would actually happen that way, you're still going to call that a false antecedent?
Yeah, because it doesn't happen.
Okay.
You know, like I don't pull out in front of the car, so that situation never happens. But the doctrine of middle knowledge says that God knows what would have happened.
Okay. If the movie It's a Wonderful Life were true, and he actually experienced that, if he died, if he never was born, you know that part?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you call it true or false? Because he actually experienced it.
I mean, it's fiction, but if
No,
he
if
were
it
never,
real, if
if
that
he were
actually
never,
happened to someone,
if he were never born, like none of that would have ever happened.
so that was true.
But it wasn't true that he wasn't born.
Right, I know. I'm just saying in real life, but he experienced it. is what
Yes, I mean it's similar to when you think of A Christmas Carol. You know, the ghost of Christmas Future shows Scrooge like what would happen if he continued to live his way. So yes, he has an experience of like if you continue to live this way, then this is what's going to happen. And then that forces Scrooge to change his decisions. So then those things never came to pass. So that's a similar situation. Yes, like I said, we use it, but again, we don't know the actuality. Like I said, if I don't pull out in front of the car because I think it's going to hit me, like I don't know if it actually would have hit me, where God knows what would have actually happened if I were to pull out in front of the car.
I think we're confusing the word false here with something that's not true. And what he's actually saying is the word false means it just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay.
I'm not talking about.
This doesn't
like,
mean
truth.
he's wrong. It just means it didn't happen.
You know, another good example is, if David were not to use kerosene when he burned that fire, then he would not have burned his leg. However, we don't know that. Like, he could have not used kerosene, and yet he still could have burnt his leg. God knows what would have happened. So this is what, this is what middle knowledge is. And now there are like I said, there are certain denominations that don't believe that God has middle knowledge because they say this never happened, so God only knows what's true. This never actually happened, so God doesn't know. And I'm not done with middle knowledge. I'm just introducing it. I'm someone who believes in middle knowledge, and I'm going to defend it. So we'll get there. I think Bill has a question.
Yes, I appreciate all those words that I don't understand, but are we actually talking about cause and effect we don't know
We'll get there.
if the
Yes.
cause is going to result in the effect that we assume it's
Yes,
going
this
to?
does have to do with cause and effect. Now, again, in case you're curious, I'll throw some more. There was a 16th century Jesuit priest named Luis de Molina, and he coined the phrase middle knowledge. Like he was defending, he coined this phrase middle knowledge, and he was defending against a push against free will. there was a big movement in the 16th century of predestination. Actually, it arose out of the Protestant Reformation. We are sort of a product of the Protestant Reformation. A lot of the non-Catholic churches are like Protestant. We're not Protestant, but there was a split from the Catholic Church. But the Protestant Reformation at the time got a lot of things sort of not right, and this was one of them. They really pushed predestination because they didn't like that the church was like saying, oh, if you do these certain things, then you'll get salvation, like pay for salvation. They're like, no, God has already chosen. We can't just sit here and give you money and then we'll get saved. So it was a reaction to a very extreme thing, and they just reacted too far. And so Molina came up with middle knowledge, and he was defending against this push of predestination because Jesuits are Catholics. So if you're someone who holds the middle knowledge, you're actually called a Molinist. So you get titles, more titles upon titles. So that's all I sort of have for now. Again, we're going to dive more into this, and there are two big objections actually against God based on omniscience. Doug brought one up last time about that if God knows everything, how can you have free will? Then if God knows everything God's going to do, does God have free will? So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into answering that. But does anybody have any questions more about middle knowledge? Microphone.
Can you redefine it? Can you redefine middle knowledge quickly?
If then, it's the knowledge of if then statements that don't happen. So like I said, if you were to have not married Leslie, then I would not have been born.
Nor Josiah.
Yeah. And so that never happened, but God knows what would have happened if that did happen. So that's...
But we could go into like the millions of different things that could have happened if I even just flicked my hand this way. So, like, we're assuming tonight that he knows what would happen if I did flick my finger this way and if I didn't flick my finger this way. So, it's this finger, everybody. It's the point. It's the pointer. I'm just saying to be ridiculous, Okay. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, so you're saying, like, we could sit here and conjure up a million different things that we could or couldn't have done, or might have or might not have done, and he knows the outcome of all of them, no matter what we say.
Yeah.
Is the thing.
That's basically what middle, and it's not even us personally. Like God knows that if a particular atom in a particular like water molecule decides to like break forth, or if it didn't decide to break, God knows of every atom in the entire universe. Like this is just illustrating how great God's knowledge is. Like his knowledge is actually infinite.
So we're really the ones creating our reality.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's where this is leading.
Okay.
Good. You're on the right track. So that we're the ones who are actually creating
We're creating our own reality.
creating our destiny, basically. Yes. So that's why she saw where this is where Molina began his defense of having free will, and that our salvation is it's in God's hands, but it's our decision. Give her the microphone back.
So what if you feel like you don't have a choice? Like let's just say someone's addicted to like alcohol or something and they can't say no to it. So if you feel like you don't have a choice, is there there's no other reality to that?
Well, there are choices even within that not having a choice. It's like that person chooses to do heroin at 5 o'clock, or that person chooses to do heroin at 6 o'clock. Their choices get smaller and smaller. That also goes back to their choice of when they first started doing heroin. But also, there are genetic predispositions, like, and then that can get traced back to someone's ancestor who maybe was an opium addict and sort of had it in their blood. I mean, there are, like you said millions, but it's actually innumerable,
Yes.
like the way this could all play out. And when we start talking about choice and free will, we'll get more into that. You can ask. You can ask.
Isn't that why Jesus came, to set us free so we can
Yes.
make choices?
But isn't this like counterintuitive of that though? Because if you're saying he knows all the possible outcomes, but he also knows which outcome we're going to choose, do we really have a choice?
All right, you couldn't wait. You couldn't wait till next week. All right, so don't confuse foreknowledge. I'm going to write these out. Don't confuse foreknowledge with, I'll write it out so it's the same word, like foreordaining or foreordination. Now, there's two types of priority here. Like you're thinking of temporal priority, so that you're thinking God knows what we're going to do before we do it, so then he therefore causes us to do it. But knowledge doesn't have causal power. Like knowledge can't cause something to happen. That would be foreordaining. Like if God foreordained you to do something, then yes, you wouldn't have a choice. Now, it's not temporal, but God's knowledge logically comes after our choice. Now, don't think after as a temporal thing, but logically, like we make our choice, and that's why God has knowledge of it. You know, it's not, but it's not in time, like it's not temporal. Like you're thinking temporally, where it's more logically. And again, having knowledge of something doesn't cause it. You know, you can say like, oh, if I put this bag of chips out here, I know my son's going to get into them. Like, but does your knowledge of that like cause it? Yeah, maybe you putting the chips out there causes it, but it's because he likes those chips and he's going to go after them. But it's not like the knowledge of that has nothing to do with sort of the decision. That's where we're going to go. We're going to go into this even more.
So really, God knows the end from the beginning, but it doesn't mean that he is orchestrating it. It is based upon choices that we make.
Individually.
Right,
I mean,
individually,
there
yes.
is foreordaining and there is types of predestination, but I don't think it involves us individually. Like we individually have the choice.
So I have a question about the foreknowledge and the foreordination. So like somebody gives you a prophetic word, which is a word from God. So God is giving you that knowledge before, and you go and make your choice and change whatever you would do based on that word. So that would be that God, so you already had the knowledge.
So you were given the knowledge, the foreknowledge as well, but you could also then choose not to follow it. You know, you might choose.
And God would know that whether you were going to be doing that or not.
Yes, but that's like it's still your decision. It's not God's decision. Even like God, like I said, we'll get into this, but God didn't cause Peter to deny him 3 times. Like Peter knew it. Peter could have been like, oh, I know this, so I'm not going to do it. But he still did it. Not because God caused him. You know, like I said, you're dealing.
He was under no obligation to do that.
Again, a lot of people confuse knowledge with, like I said, predestination is the word I use foreordaining, but predestination. You know, so I think we'll end there. Oh, wait. Oh, okay, I want to hear this.
So with that example, he was put in a position where maybe he didn't have the choice. Like, you know, was he put in that position where he didn't think he had a choice to deny him? Like that's.
I honestly don't think, like personally, my view of Peter at that time, I don't think Peter was even thinking about that. Like Peter believed there's like no way I'm going to deny you, but then he was put in a situation where emotionally, I think he was overwhelmed, and he just did it. Yeah, he just did it.
Right, but
then
being
afterwards,
put in that situation kind of takes away that choice, doesn't it?
but he wasn't like, the knowledge didn't put him in any situation. Like Peter knowing he was going to deny Christ didn't cause those people to accuse him of knowing Christ. Like you had people accuse Peter like, oh, he knows Christ, he knows the Christ. Like they didn't know that he was going to deny him. Are you just turning it off, or do you have a question? Okay. Well, I'm going to end it there because there's too many rabbit holes we're going to go down.